Let's Talk TCI Real Estate is a program that is geared towards educating you and me about real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands. You are welcome to join the conversation today by adding your comments, and also if you have a question, please ask your question and we will do our best to get those questions answered for you. Do not miss this opportunity. Put your questions in the comment section. I would also ask you to please share the page, like the page, just in case there's someone else out there who would like to hear about the topic that we are speaking about today. I want to also use this opportunity just to thank my guest from last week, Ms. Devanya DeVoe. She spoke about probate and estate administration process in the Turks and Caicos Islands. If you did not have an opportunity to watch that episode, please feel free to go back on the Facebook page, or you can visit my YouTube channel, which is Vernica Delancey. A lot of very good and informative information was presented in that segment, especially for those of us who are experiencing issues with administration of generational property. I think that's a show you would really want to go back and take a look at. Again, I will say for the last time, please put your comments in the section and also any questions that you may have. But today, I am delighted to have with me another guest in the person of Miss Tremmaine Harvey, and she will be speaking to us about the whole process of buying real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So I'm going to ask Miss Tremmaine at this time to please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Vernica, for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation and looking forward to it, and to commend you on such a wonderful initiative and endeavor. I watched several episodes as you roll them out, and you're doing an awesome job. So, as
Thank
for
you.
who am I? My name is Tremmaine Harvey, and how I like to introduce myself is I'm a child of God. I'm a child of the Turks and Caicos Islands. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. And for the purposes of today's conversation, I'm an attorney with Misick Stanbrook, 15 years of call, and real estate sales and real estate financing is my area of specialty. I spend 90% of my day doing that, helping people buy land, sell land, and when I talk about land, I'm talking about vacant land, homes, condos, you name it. I assist in terms of real estate transactions.
Well, thank you so much. Again, thank you for all the kind words, and thank you definitely for being on this show. We both know that, in the areas that we work in, these are questions that come up from time to time with our customers, our clients, and it's always good to be able to get that information out there and give them an opportunity to also ask us questions in return so that they can get those questions answered.
Yeah.
Because real estate is a very important sector in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and so I'm just looking forward to this conversation today.
Yes.
So basically, I saw that you wrote an article about buying real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and I'm just wondering what actually inspired you to put that article together.
Okay, so I would have mentioned that I've been practicing for a number of years, and you tend to get the same questions from time to time, and especially from clients who from overseas, from the US, from Canada, you tend to see some of the same questions over and over. So I thought, let me put some information out there that will kind of help and address and answer some of these questions. So that really was the inspiration behind it, sort of like a frequently asked questions guide in terms of purchasing real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Okay, cool. And like you said, I know you talked about clients from all of these countries, but I just want people to know this doesn't just apply to those who are non-residents. This information also applies to residents on the island as well.
Precisely.
Okay. So just reading the article, there were a number of points that you spoke about. Could we just go a little bit, dive into them a little bit, just to tell us what are the things that you think that people need to know about when buying in the Turks and Caicos Islands?
Okay, so when you're buying in the Turks and Caicos Islands, first thing that you need to consider is that the Turks and Caicos Islands government operates a system of registered land. Okay, what does that mean? There's the Registered Land Ordinance, which is the guiding law in terms of registered land. And that gives a block and parcel number to each piece of land in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Right.
A block number, what is a block number? That's basically the general area of where the property is situated. So they would hear of Cheshire Hall and Richmond Hill, Norway and Five Keys, the Bight and Thomas Stubbs, and that will give you an indication of where the land is situated. So Norway and Five Keys, you're thinking Five Keys, you're thinking South Dock, you're thinking Chalk Sound. Leeward going through, you're thinking Leeward Palms. So those are the general areas. And then each parcel of land has a specific title number. So that's a unique identifier of, basically the name of your property.
Right.
It's identified by a number. And the land registry, which is in Grand Turk, they maintain a system of registration, and you can look into each piece of land to see the history, and that's called a copy of the land register.
Okay.
So it will have everything that you need to know from a buying perspective in relation to that land. The history of the ownership, the size of it, how many acres, whether it's crown land or freehold title, whether it's a road parcel, or whether there are any charges on it. For instance, if someone buys land and bank finances it, they will put security on that property. So that's the system of registered land. So for instance, U.S. clients, they have what you call registration of deeds, which is a completely different thing. And they often ask about title companies and title insurance, which we do not have in the Turks and Caicos Islands, because title is guaranteed by the government because they maintain this system of registered land.
Right, and this is all through the Torrent system.
Yes, the Torrent system.
Okay, not to cut you across, but you talked about title insurance. This is a term we always hear. I mean, just for my sake, what exactly is title insurance?
Okay, so let's just use the U.S. as an example, title insurance, where they don't have the system of registration. Someone buying, particularly if they're getting financing, they would get insurance to cover the lender in the event that once they start negotiating or they purchase the land, some issue comes up in terms of their title, defective title, or whether there was a lien or a charge on the property that wasn't paid off by the previous owner. That insurance is there to sort of cover them. In the Turks and Caicos Islands, before you purchase land, your attorney would investigate the title so you are clear on exactly what charges apply, what restrictive agreements apply, what easements apply. Now, to explain restrictive agreements, easements, etc. A restrictive agreement is basically, it restricts your use of the property, what you can do with the property. And you find a lot of homeowners association, they have those. And it'll give you an indication of what you can and can't do with the property. So for instance, all roofs colors must be white. Your fence must be made of a certain material. You can't have pets or you can't have clotheslines. So that's an example of a restrictive agreement. An easement is sort of a benefit that someone would have on your land or you would have on another person's land, say for instance, to pass through. So if you're landlocked per se and you need an easement, a vehicular or pedestrian easement to get through on another person's land, that's an easement. And all of that is recorded on the land register, which is held at the land registry in Grand Turk.
I mean, I like what you said about the attorney is going to make sure do those due diligence to ensure that they have gathered all that information and that it's on the land register. That's really important to know because you do have customers who are puzzled about not having title insurance and is trying to figure out, well, how are they going to be ensure that their interest is represented and that there are no surprises when they now purchase the property. But that land register holds so much of information, and that information is like a walking Bible. It's guaranteed because that's what it is.
Absolutely. It's guaranteed by the Crown. So no need to get title insurance. We don't operate that here in the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Crown guarantees it by the system of registration. And each piece of land has its own story to tell, its own unique history.
Cool. And another thing you mentioned in the article, you were talking about a one-time stamp duty. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that for us?
Okay, so in other countries, they have what's called property taxes, and you pay that on an annual basis. We don't have that in the Turks and Caicos. We have what's called stamp duty, and it's a one-time payment of duty, and it's based upon the value that's set out in the transfer. The transfer is the document that transfers ownership from seller to buyer. And based on the value that's in there, basically the purchase price, the purchase and sale price, stamp duty is calculated on that. The rates of stamp duty differ. They differ depending on which island you are on. So for instance, Providenciales has the higher rates of stamp duty versus the other islands, Grand Turk. And then it's also based on the value of the transaction. So for instance, $25,000 and under, there's no stamp duty paid on that. And then the scale goes up 6.5%, speaking of Providenciales, 8%, and 10% as you go up the ladder in terms of the value of the consideration.
Okay, yeah, and I know on the other outer islands, the stamp duty is even less.
Yes, 5%.
Yeah. And this is some incentive by the government, obviously, to bring investment believing into the country.
Yes, definitely. And presently, while we're on the topic of stamp duty, the government has initiated two different stamp duty programs. So there's the stamp duty exemption or rate reduction, which islanders, previously known as belongers, and BOTCs can qualify for, which basically reduces the rate of stamp duty so long as you meet certain qualifying criteria. And then there's the first-time homeowners stamp duty exemption, where you can get a reduction of up to $50,000 in a combination of stamp duty and customs duty import.
Okay, it's interesting that you said that there are two programs that are being run at this time. And I'm quite aware of the one up to $50,000. The one that you spoke about previously, like you say, reach certain criteria. Does this apply if you say not first-time homeowners? Is this straight across the board?
For Turks and Caicos Islanders
Right.
and BOTC citizens. And it's really would differentiate the first-time home buyer
Right.
versus someone who would have already had land, developed it. They're looking to invest in another property, then they can qualify for that rate reduction, provided they check all the boxes.
Okay, is it the same application form? Just curious.
There's a link which the government operates. You can find it on the government website, and there are two different application forms. The details are,
Right.
very similar, but one will lead you to the first-time homeowners application, and one will lead you to the rate reduction application.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a question we normally get, because for some persons who may have purchased before, they're wondering, okay, how can I also benefit from this reduction in stamp duty? So that really clears up that question for us.
Yes.
So another thing that you had mentioned on in your article that you spoke of was really about sellers not getting their funds on the day of closing. This is so important. Can you please explain the process, explain why it's not the process, and explain probably for us, what's the, if I may say, the guarantee, or how do they feel, how do you as an attorney make that person feel secure, knowing that they're handing over keys and not getting their funds on the day of closing?
Okay, so I'm going to use the U.S. again as an example. Typically, what would happen, you do all of the negotiation, you sign your contract. When it comes to closing day, everybody meets together, say they meet at a registration office, and they hand over the documents, the transfer documents. They hand over the funds, hand over keys, deed change, you are now the new owner. That's not how it works in Turks and Caicos.
Right.
Because of that Torrance land registration system that we speak about, land registration doesn't take place, transfer registration doesn't take place on the same day of closing. There's a gap between the closing day, which is basically just the exchange of documents to transfer ownership and funds, or if you're getting financing, letter of undertaking from the bank committing that once registration is complete, that they're going to pay out funds to the seller. Right. So there's this delay period. And what happens during that period, the purchaser would send their documents to be registered to the land registry. And because of this delay, it's built into the purchase and sale agreement, into the contract, that funds are held in escrow by the vendor's attorney for either 14 or 21 days. Those are the normal periods that you would see. They have to hold those funds in escrow while the purchaser sends their documents in to be registered. And the objective, the whole thought process and idea behind it is that in that period, the purchaser's registration would be secured within either 14 or 21 days, and then the funds can be released to the vendor.
Right. And and of course, I'm sure that there is something in the contract in the event of a default that will protect the seller.
Yes, precisely. Protect the seller, protect the purchaser. Those are those default provisions built into there. So they can sue for damages, they can sue for specific for performance, which basically compels them to carry out the terms of the contract. And specifically in terms of registration, 100% of your contracts are going to say that if an issue arises in registration, there's an obligation on the vendor so far as it's within their power to assist you in rectifying that issue.
Okay. I want to stick a pin here and say this, but I don't want to talk that much about it because I'm going to ask you that a little later on in the show. But just to say that's exactly a really good reason why it's so important to have a real estate, an attorney involved in a real estate transaction so that they can assist in holding these funds in escrow to be able to protect the interest moving forward.
Exactly.
Okay. So let me ask you also, doing a transaction for purchasing a business, is it the same process that if you were to purchase vacant land or a home or a condo? Is there a difference?
Yes, there is a difference. First of all, the first difference is there is no registration process if you're purchasing a business per se. With land, you have that registration process. And then the types of due diligence that you're going to be doing is different. With land purchases, when I say land, I'm speaking generally. Vacant land, something developed on it. You're going to get your land registered. You're going to check that out. You're going to do your boundary survey. Those are the usual types of due diligence that you do. If it's a house, you're going to do your inspection, get your structural person in to see, okay, the structure is sound. When you're purchasing a business, you have to look at, okay, what are the debts of this business? I'm buying this business. What debts does this business have? The employees. Am I going to let them go? Am I going to keep them on? So you're looking at employment contracts, whether anybody needs to be paid out. If you're, letting them go, fresh employment contracts. What exactly of the assets are you purchasing? Are you getting everything, or are you only getting specific assets? So the due diligence is different, the documentation is different, and there isn't that registration process per se.
So because there isn't a per se registration process, there isn't a stamp duty for the transfer of the business?
If you are purchasing the shares in the company itself, then there's share transfer duty if the company owns land. So that's a whole nother area and topic. But otherwise, no.
Okay. So I have another question. So as a developer, I have to read this question because I really wanted to get this in. As a developer purchasing real estate in Turks and Caicos, what would you say would be different about the purchasing process? And what are some of the things that they may want to include in their sales agreement that may be different from an individual making a process? Sorry, and I want to ask this question because we have a lot of developments that are happening on the island, and a lot of people are aspiring to be developers. So just want to get an idea of what is expected out of that transaction.
Okay. Well, first of all, if you're a developer versus, me just buying property on my own, you have to really have in mind what your objective is, what your goal is, and what type of development you're seeking to put in place. Because the first thing that's going to determine that is where you seek to buy the land. Because there is a zoning area. Each area, each parcel of land is zoned. And the zoning areas you have are commercial, you have tourism and real estate, tourism and hospitality. Then you have mixed use, which is a combination of tourism and commercial, and then you have residential. So the first thing that you want to consider is this property zoned to do what it is that I want to do?
Correct.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is in terms of restrictive agreements that I would have mentioned earlier. If you're buying in an area where there's a restrictive agreement, that will restrict what and how you develop the property. So that's another consideration that you want to look at as a developer.
Right.
The other thing, again, your objectives. Do you want beachfront development? Do you want canal front development? Do you want inland development? All of that will determine how you approach the whole process in terms of that. So when you're looking into putting your contract together, you want to ensure, okay, check the zoning, make sure it's zoned for what you want to do, check any restrictive agreements, and those are the types of things that you want to make sure is in the contract. You want to make sure that the owner has any outstanding homeowners fees for that. They'll come after you to say, okay, now you are the landowner of this property, you are responsible for these fees.
Right. So basically they should just, for example, they are looking at a particular parcel of land to put a development on, and of course they're purchasing it through an individual. So before they even enter into any agreement, they should probably have their attorney draw up that letter of intent, because their attorney will be more knowledgeable about what to put in the contract, conditions to put in the contracts, before just tying up and saying, oh, I like this land, it's large enough for what I want to do with it, let's move forward.
Yes, precisely.
Okay, that's really good to know. And also, where does the environmental study comes in? Is that after the purchase of the land or before the purchase of the land?
In most cases, it's once you've purchased the land, so you're already the owner, and you want to, let's just say you want to build a 10-story building.
Right.
When you're getting your planning approvals and going through that whole planning process, that's where the environmental impact assessment is required to see, okay, can this development be sustained in this area? How is this going to affect the environment? So that's once you have already acquired the land.
Okay. So let's just pause for a moment. Just want to say to anyone who is watching today, if you have a question or comment, please feel free to put it in the comment section below so we can get those questions or comment. Don't wait until we're not live and send it in. This is a really good opportunity to get those questions answered. All right? Now I'm going to ask you that question. Why is it so important to have an attorney involved in a real estate transaction? This is a question I've asked several of my guests before, and I continue to ask this question because in the field of real estate, this is something I have to explain to individuals over and over, because we all feel that and I'm not knocking anyone down, because we know how to read a document, that we feel that we are okay about doing it ourselves or registering the property. What would you say is the benefits of having an attorney involved?
Okay, so I'll tell you the benefits of having an attorney involved, and then I'll tell you some of the horror stories when you don't have an attorney involved. So an attorney, particularly a real estate attorney, they would have the experience and the training to know these are the pitfalls, these are the areas that I need to be looking at. They would be up to date with the legislation. They would be up to date on all of the requirements. There are timelines involved in your purchasing process. They would know exactly what to do on a step-by-step basis.
Right.
As a person, you're just thinking, oh, I'm so excited about this purchase, I can do this. Yeah, I can, look over this and I'll be fine. But, you're looking at the big picture. An attorney is trained to look at all of those nitty-gritty details. They are your advocate. They're your representative. They will look out for your best interest, and they will provide advice on your options and give you the opportunity to say, okay, this is the direction that I would like to pursue.
Right.
Now, legal language, it's a language all to
by
itself.
Yes.
And, you need some special training to be able to interpret and to also be able to ensure that you're adequately protected. So, for instance, differences in words, must, shall, those are mandatory words versus may. So if you see a may in there, I could do it if I want, versus if you see must in there, then it has to be done.
Right.
So you want someone looking out for you to ensure, those differences are covered. To give an example, I recently did a transaction earlier this year where the parties had agreed on certain things prior to coming to the attorneys.
Okay.
Then when I came to drafting the contract and I said, spell this out, when we take it to the other side, the other attorney said, no, this isn't what my client agreed to.
Right.
And then in discussing it with my client, I said, I'm getting some pushback on that. And they produced correspondence to say, okay, this is what we agreed. And I read it and I said, yeah, but this is so vague. This can mean any number of things. You both had different interpretations of what this means. So having an attorney in that process would tighten all of that up to ensure that there's no ambiguity, there's no vagueness, everybody's on the same page. These words mean these specific things. These are the obligations. These are the rights. So it's very important. Like I said, there are timelines. So for instance, if you don't pay your stamp duty on time within 30 days, then you can face penalties. And depending on how long it remains unpaid, you can face penalties up to 4 times the amount of stamp duty.
That's a really good tip. Trust me. Yeah.
Someone who doesn't know that, okay, I need to secure this at the land registry. Yes, I've paid over my money, I got the keys, I moved in, but if you don't complete that process, technically, you don't own the property. You could be paying insurance on it wouldn't get to that point, but you could be paying, say, power bill, all these other expenses, fixing up the property that you don't own because it wasn't completed at the land registry. So your attorney will look into all of that, ensure all of that's covered. This is something that we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Correct.
So, we know what to look for, what to advise you on, how to guide you in that process. So I would strongly recommend that, people get attorneys in the process, because the opposite side of that is the expense that you go through, trying to rectify an issue after the fact. I've had people come to me where they thought they were buying one piece of land and they ended up with another, or they thought they were buying vacant land or had bought what they thought was vacant land, and when they came to actually find out there's a structure on the property that someone else had built, because they didn't have that specifically trained eye to look out for all of these things.
Yeah. You had mentioned about registration of the property, and that's a very important and very good point as well, because I've experienced before where a customer has said, I've purchased a property, but when you ask them for a copy of the registration, they couldn't produce it because they never did, just thinking because money had exchanged hands that the transaction was completed. And, it sounds simple, but in the long run, after you've let that go so long, that person who have sold it you may have passed away, but technically it's still in that person's name. So there are things like that is happening out there, and if you're not alert, you don't have somebody who is assisting you with it, that's possible. And I also would say we've had a number of persons who have been taken advantage of because of situations like that, and because of not using an attorney and not knowing the process, they just thought that they automatically own that particular parcel, and only to be told at a later date, sorry, but you have to leave because it's not owned by yourselves.
Yeah, and those are some very, very, very unfortunate situations. You have people preying on others, taking advantage of those who are vulnerable. So those situations do occur.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that you said the cost to rectify the situation afterwards, sometimes it costs you more than just hiring the attorney.
Yes.
And I feel that most attorneys, like most cases, you can find an attorney who will work along with you in terms of the payment. Not to say like we're paying $20 a month, no. But if you are a customer who, of an attorney, and depending on the situation, they will be able to work something out for you to ensure that things move smoothly in terms of payment and getting the transaction
Yeah.
completed.
Yeah, definitely.
And I also feel like some attorneys, we always think that an attorney fee is expensive, but you can find attorneys who have reasonable
Fees.
prices
Yes.
that you can work along with.
Yeah, definitely. Um, there's the industry standard rate, as well as there are fixed fee rates depending on the value of the transaction.
Correct.
So, don't allow the cost of, hiring an attorney to deter you from getting one. Because in the end, if you don't, and you end up in a situation where there's something that needs to be rectified, the money that you have to pay out on the end, it's going to be far greater than any attorney fee that you would have to pay.
Right. Talking about attorneys from an international standpoint, um, if someone is buying real estate in an international person, can they use an attorney that is outside the jurisdiction?
Absolutely not. That person would be operating contrary to the laws of the Turks and Caicos Islands, contrary to the legal profession ordinance. Every practicing attorney in the Turks and Caicos Islands must be admitted and called to the bar of the Turks and Caicos Islands and issued with a practicing certificate from the Turks and Caicos Islands. And then you want somebody who is familiar with the laws of the Turks and Caicos Islands because, as we have discussed, there are differences in how our system works versus, say, for instance, the U.S. or Canada.
Correct. And so therefore they should connect, like you say, with an attorney here, because that attorney will be able to give the best advice as to how to move forward.
Absolutely.
Just trying to get these questions out here
Yes.
because these are questions we are asked all the time.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, just if you have a question, feel free to put it in this comment section. Let us know, and we will be more than happy to answer those questions for you. All right. Recently, I've seen that you have been advertising the whole free legal advice by the Bar Association. Can you elaborate a little bit on it and to let us know what the Bar Association is doing? How successful has this been, and just tell us a little bit more about it.
Okay, so it's a free legal advice clinic that operates once a month. There was a break in August and September. It reconvened last week, and it'll be held again this month in November. So it's a free legal advice clinic, 2 hours. The previous ones have been virtually on Zoom, and the next one, the aim is to have an actual location advised where people can actually come in. They can bring in their issues and get free legal advice from those attorneys who have volunteered their time. And this is an initiative that is being led by the Pro Bono Committee of the Bar Association to do pro bono work to give back. That initiative is being led by Mr. David Catman, KC, and it's been going really well. People are looking forward to it. Once I've put the information out, I've had people asking me, okay, I'm sorry I missed that one, when is the next one coming? Because people have real issues that they need assistance with. So that's something that the Bar Association, the Pro Bono Committee has been putting on.
And that also includes real estate advice if a transaction has gone bad.
Yes, any type of advice that you're seeking in, you can consult that attorney. They'll give you free advice for the time allotted for that period. That advice can also include what you need to do going from here, the steps that you could take.
Okay. Just because you said it's a Zoom session, I just want to know when a person goes into the link, do they have privacy or is it an open forum?
It's they can privacy. Once they get into the general room, an attorney will be there to connect them and sort of direct them to a breakout room where they have that one-on-one with a specific attorney to go through their issue. So there is that privacy issue. So it's not I'm bringing my issue and all the listeners will hear. No, it's private one-on-one sessions that are break off. Zoom has that capability to do private sessions. So.
Okay. Well, I think it's a very good initiative. When I saw it, I was like, oh, this is really good for people. And I think that everyone should take advantage of it. And I know that persons even have, just say, approach us as real estate agents about issues that they are having, about transactions that have gone sideways. There have been issues such as one person building on someone else's land, like you have mentioned before. There's been issues where we had a few people, because one person started on the wrong land, the whole trend started. There have been a lot of encroachment issues, and so I feel like it's a real good initiatives. And if anyone who's listening who normally will listen to this show, this is a really good opportunity where you can feel out an attorney to figure out what you can do and what's the next step forward for your transaction in terms of real estate and how you can move forward on it.
Yeah, and just to put this out there in terms of where they can find the information.
Yes.
On the next one. We've been putting out the information, and the Turks and Caicos Sun and other news outlets have been really good about putting it on their social media pages. So Magnetic Media, the Sun, PTV, all of those avenues, they publish the information for us.
Okay. So we're getting ready to wrap up this segment. It's normally just 45 minutes. It goes by fast when you're talking, especially about something that you're passionate about. Well, of course, I'm passionate about real estate, and I know that you're passionate about your job. Before I allow you to do the closing remarks, I just want to go back and ask a question about me hiring an attorney one more time. I know that you had mentioned that in buying real estate in Turks and Caicos Islands, it's very good to have a real estate attorney involved. And that stood out with me because I'll tell you the truth. I had a guest on the show before, and that was one of her things. She said going through the process, she realized and understood the importance of having a real estate attorney and not just any attorney. So from a developer standpoint as well, would there be a difference? I know it's real estate that they're purchasing, but is there a different credential that they should look for in an attorney to represent their interests, seeing that their purchase is not an ordinary purchase like a regular single family home or just a vacant land?
In terms of developers, like I said, if it's a real estate attorney, you're already
in good hands.
In good hands.
Okay.
Versus, say, for instance, a litigator, someone who
Right.
is often off to court, and you need to get them right away. Say, for instance, you need to renegotiate your closing date, and you can't get them because they're in court.
Right.
Those are certain things that you want to be wary of. So you want to make sure, okay, it's a real estate attorney.
That's their focus.
This is their focus. This is what they do. Because like I said, there are deadlines involved, timelines involved, and if you fall afoul of that, you can breach your contract, you can lose your deposit. So yeah, if it's a real estate attorney as a developer, I wouldn't say that there are any differences in what you should be looking for. Obviously, experience.
Yes, we know that. It's very important.
Yes, experience versus, say, for instance, someone who would not have had that experience previously.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give you this opportunity to give your closing remarks. And once you're done with your closing remarks, I also want to invite you to please share your contact information to the listening public.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. So thank you again for this opportunity. Like I said, I was very thrilled and excited about it. All of these common questions, frequently asked questions that we have about real estate in the Turks and Caicos, what you're doing is awesome. So I just commend you on that once again to keep doing that.
Thank you.
In terms of closing remarks, for those interested in purchasing real estate, I would say begin to position yourself. Save up your funds for your deposit. That's going to be required off the top, and that's usually 10%. So begin to position yourself. Search out areas. Define exactly what it is that you want. Do I want inland, beachfront, ocean view? And then just begin to get that process going. Don't be afraid of legal fees, because the alternative is something more expensive. You could end yourself in some really deep problems. So position yourself.
Great.
In terms of my contact details, my email, TREMMAICKSTANBROOK.TC. And of course, I can be contacted at Misick Stanbrook, 946-4732.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's, again, like I say, it's a pleasure to be here. and to have this conversation with you. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to allow you to be a part of this conversation as those in the general public listen. There weren't any questions today. I know I'm going to get questions tomorrow, and I'm going to say, email Tremmaine Harvey. Yes, but definitely it's a pleasure having you with us. And of course, this information is very vital in this time. Real estate is trending in the Turks and Caicos Islands. There are a lot of people who are interested in real estate, but there are a lot of people who still need to understand the process and to know how their investment is going to be secure. And I invite you all who are listening, please definitely have an attorney be a part of your real estate transaction when you are doing your closing. And so I will say to, again, all those who are listening, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being a part of this show. As always, let me know if there's another topic you would like for me to bring before you. I will try my best to find someone to come and speak on that topic. So until next time, I say to you, stay safe and remain blessed. Have a very good evening. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate and not that of Keller Williams TCI or any of its affiliates. Any action you take upon the information provided on this show is strictly at your own risk, and Let's Talk TCI Real Estate guest or host will not be liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of the material. I am not an investment advisor, broker, or dealer.